Welcome to the Disrupting Obesity podcast. I'm Charlotte Skanes, and I'll be sharing ways to regain control over your body and lose an extreme amount of weight naturally. Being fat is about so much more than just the food. It's about your relationship with food. That means that dealing with your weight is about more than just the food, too. You have to change that relationship. You have to start disrupting obesity. This is the fourth of our 9 lists of 9 episodes, and I'm loving them. It's been a lot of fun so far, and the next ones are pretty fun too. Plus, we've got our regularly scheduled Ask Whatever episode coming up, and I'm going to do another list of 9 questions that I've been avoiding. I'm going to take down the next 9. Today's episode is all about 9 ways to keep yourself going, especially when you've got a lot of weight to lose. Losing weight is hard, and it takes a long time. It's a good idea to start thinking and strategizing about how you're going to keep yourself going. Because if you're looking for the motivation to come from outside yourself, you're in trouble before you even get started. Last week, we talked about ways to make things easier on yourself. And a lot of those things apply today too. The lists have overlap, loads of it. We've got some super concrete tips and some abstract stuff to go over today too. It's going to get a little heavy. Sorry, guys. But I've got some quick and very practical tips to round this one out today. So let's get rolling. First up today are pictures and measurements. Pictures and measurements are going to help you keep yourself going because they're another way to see your progress. When you're losing weight sustainably, it can be really hard to see your progress. The changes are gradual, and we have a tendency to focus on the scale to our detriment. I get it. And this one falls in the category of please do as I say, not as I did. I know it's hard to learn from other people's mistakes, but I desperately wish that I'd had something other than the scale to focus on. And I didn't get obsessive about the scale. Well, I did at the very beginning. And then I threw my scale in the garbage and started weighing myself at Sunday dinners at my mother-in-law's instead. So I feel like I learned to strike a healthy balance with it. I figured out pretty early on that I was doing myself way more harm than good. So I set a boundary for myself with the scale. I just wish I'd had a distraction, right? Something else to focus on. Now, last week I talked about my yarn hack. Which is just another way to create a different kind of visual for yourself. Numbers on a page or on a scale are terrific things, but when you can find other ways to visualize your success, your progress, you're less likely to get stuck. It also helps prevent total scale fixation. If that's the only number you've got to look at and the only way to gauge how well you're doing, it's harder to find reasons to keep moving forward. I know these can be touchy subjects. I've had really strong feelings about pictures and measurements. I don't have either one from the start of my weight loss journey. I wouldn't even write the numbers down as I was losing weight. Just nope. It was bad enough to know that I weighed 338 pounds, let alone seeing it in writing. Just pass. I'm in no way saying that was a healthy mindset or attitude. Obviously, I urge you to do the exact opposite on here all the time. I can't shut up about awareness. But it's still the truth. I wouldn't write it down. I just couldn't do it. And I'm a writer, a pretty much lifelong journaler. Nope. So there wasn't a chance that I was going to do things like measure my thighs or my arms. It honestly didn't even occur to me. The first time around, there was no social media. There was no internet sea of fun ideas to try. And pictures? Forget it. I didn't let anybody take my picture for years. I was a pro at hiding from the camera. Now, this was all before smartphones. So you had to have an actual physical camera for there to be a photo, like with film and stuff. I think we've kind of forgotten the way pictures used to be an event, like they were a big deal, right? Digital cameras were just starting to become mainstream right around the time I got married, but we still had disposable cameras, the ones with film on the tables at our wedding. And I'm just going to say that if you have men in kilts at your wedding, please be prepared for some super fun questions when you get those little things developed. But I was the same weight on my wedding day as I am today, 137 pounds. So I wasn't bothered by the proliferation of pictures and cameras. But when I was fat, forget about it. It was a hard no. I would do damn near anything to get out of pictures. I would leave the room. I would leave that floor of the house entirely. Bathrooms and kitchens were probably my favorite. I'd walk outside at Christmas without a coat on if I had to. I didn't want a visual record of how big I was. I didn't want to see the picture. I didn't want to be in the pictures. The thought of doing a set of, before pictures would have horrified me. I would have said that I didn't want to remember what I look like. I think I was wrong. I wish I'd been in the pictures, not to compare myself now, but just so I had more of a record of my life then. I have a lot of memory issues, and pictures really help me because a lot of the time the memory, sorry, it's still there, right? I need a way to trigger it. When it comes to the weight loss, I did it without pictures, but I wish I'd had them. It would have helped me when it came to the way I was talking to myself, the way I beat myself up, or I would fixate on not seeing the scale go down, right? If I'd had pictures and I could see the changes, I think it would have made a huge difference. I'm not going to tell you not to be afraid of taking the pictures. I'm saying push through it because it's worth it. And no, you don't need somebody else to take them for you either. Stand in front of a mirror and use your phone. I've done it in a change room at a store. I've done it in public washrooms at restaurants. Just wait for everybody to clear out and go for it. Restaurant bathrooms are great because you can stand farther back from the mirror to get your whole self in. And change rooms are great just because they're private. Everybody just thinks that you're in there trying something on, right? Here's what I would do. I would use one of the hundreds of free apps that will let you put two pictures side by side, just like my before and after pictures, so that I can see them at the same time. You can load your photos into a grid and see yourself shrinking a frame at a time, right? It's so motivating and so empowering. Let me know if you'd like me to show you how, because that's something I could put a video up on Instagram and YouTube if it's not something people are familiar with doing. Um, but you can use your measurements to motivate yourself too. Something I've found again and again is that there are times when the scale doesn't move, but your measurements might. I've had somebody just ready to throw in the towel and then they go check their measurements and they've seen a loss there. That happens all the time. Um, and that can be enough to help them keep going. When I was writing my weight loss workbook, Disruptor, I knew early on that I wanted to include checklists and tables that would help you stay on top of those pictures and measurements, specifically those two things. So I built them out. I even put in reminders to be extra obnoxious about it. You can find the book on Amazon, by the way, and I'll warn you now that it's going to come up a couple more times today. Our next tip is similar to this one, and they are definitely related, but it for sure needed its own segment. And that's the quote unquote fat clothes, because you want to hang on to some of these too. Pictures are great visuals and measurements are great so that you have other numbers to look at than the one on the scale. Clothes are tactile. We've got a completely different attachment to them. It's a whole other experience. And I think you're going to want to have it. I know I love it. It's crazy to climb back in, you know, just climb back into a pair of like my red velour size 24 pants that were skin tight, right? And I'm pretty sure they got too small too. I've got a pair of hospital pants from my university days because they were super trendy when I was in university. And I was at my heaviest weight when I was in university too. But these were the biggest size that I could get. And they were so tight that the stitches in the thighs were just screaming. They're stretched all to hell now. And I can get both of my legs into one of the legs. And I have a couple of sweatshirts and a couple of pairs of jeans, but I only have them because my mother had them tucked away in her basement. For years, I thought the only thing that I had from my fat days were my red velour pants. And I really regretted that so much. I really, really wished I'd kept more things, but I'd been so angry about being so big and I wanted to just forget it and never go back. So I got rid of my clothes as I got smaller. I was thrilled when my mom pulled out my old Tigger sweatshirt and my U of T pants. Clothes will take you back like pictures do. Sometimes even more. You remember where you were when you wore them, or just generally that time in your life, right? I'm not saying keep everything or even most things. I'm saying hold on to a few key pieces. I do make some suggestions and I have worksheets and reminders for you, just, to hang on to clothes and stuff in Disruptor. That's the weight loss workbook that I was just talking about. I just find it's easier when you have a structure to follow. But I would tuck the clothes away right? Like just load your favorite dress and a pair of pants and a t-shirt, all that stuff. Load it into a tote and just tuck it away. Then you can pull it out and give yourself a massive motivation boost. Don't just throw everything out. Actually, don't throw any of it out. Donate it. Plus size clothes are always in high demand at thrift stores and charity shops. You might have a local women's shelter or homeless shelter that's looking for clothes that would be suitable for job interviews. Please consider donating your clothes instead of just chucking them out. I know it's easier, but there's probably a donation bin or a thrift shop somewhere in your community. And a quick Google search can put you in touch with somebody at the shelter. Wouldn't it feel good to know you're helping, right? But you won't regret hanging on to a few things. You can do really fun side by side pictures of yourself in your outfits, right? Take the same picture in the same place every other month and just watch yourself shrinking in real time. It's not easy for everybody to see the changes as they're happening. Like I knew I was getting smaller. I was buying smaller clothes. People were telling me I looked smaller, but I didn't see it. I looked the same to me. If I was sitting in a lawn chair in a bathing suit, my thighs looked the same to me at 220 pounds as they had at 338. I knew they couldn't be the same size, but I just couldn't see it. And I know that sounds a tad nuts. I realize it's a dysmorphia thing, but I couldn't help it. I feel like if I'd had pictures, if I'd had a pair of pants I could pull on, I think that would have made a difference. I really think that would have made it easier. It's just something I wish I'd known to do. I wish I'd known how motivating it is and how much it helps you keep going. Another way to keep going is through having micro and macro goals and incentives. And this is another one that I have a framework for in my workbook. And I am sorry for all the shameless plugs, but if I don't tell you that I've done the heavy lifting for you and all you have to do is fill in some super pretty pages, I'm really not helping anybody. And I'm trying to get my head around this part, the part where I tell you guys about the things I've created to help you with all of this. I'm pretty good talking about the free resources, but I am not so hot at the selling part. But Disruptor, that's my workbook, it does have worksheets to help you map out your micro and macro goals. And I think those are important things. It's not bribery to incentivize yourself. And even if it is, who cares? Gladys isn't even going to know that when you lose your next 10 pounds, you're going for a mani-pedi. And at 25, you're getting those pants you've had your eye on. Gladys doesn't need to know about the trip you're going to take when you get to your goal weight. It's none of her business. And it's nobody else's either. But you should make it your business. Find things to focus on other than the scale. Sometimes the difference between grabbing 3 cookies or 4, even when you're having a super shitty day, can be the promise of, a new set of lashes that's coming up in 3 more pounds, right? There's nothing wrong with any of this. You need a mix of micro and macro goals, little ones and big ones. There are few things as relative as money. So everybody's idea of what constitutes micro and macro is going to be different. And not all incentives have to involve money. Some of the most rewarding incentives are about experiences, things you get to do because you're not limited by your size anymore. Either concretely limited because you can't physically do it, or abstractly limited because of the impact of your size on your self-esteem and your self-confidence that wouldn't allow you to do it. I would avoid, though, food-based incentives for your goals. That doesn't really reinforce the mindset changes you're making. You need to know that not all goals on your weight loss journey involve numbers. Your goals can include things like not needing a seatbelt extender or being able to do the stairs without having to put both feet on each step. There'll be big ones, macro goals, right? And then little things, micro goals. But they're all going to be relative to what matters to you. I never wanted to meet the weight restriction for an electric scooter, but I know people that matters to. And whether or not it's a micro or a macro goal will depend on how much riding a scooter means to you. But there are lots of goals, and the more of them you have to focus on, the better. Seriously, you want as many as you can get. I loved being able to cross my legs at the knee and tie my shoes without getting winded. That stuff felt huge for me. It still does. Fitting into restaurant booths and movie theater seats. And I'm sorry, Gladys, because I know the emails are coming, but I do realize that not all of these things are going to apply to everybody. I'm not deliberately trying to exclude or shame anyone with any amount of weight to lose. I'm trying to create a space for people who have a lot to lose, and you don't get to play a reverse Uno card here and say that I'm discriminating. I'm sorry if my examples aren't inclusive enough, but they're examples from my actual life. And they're all things that I've talked to my flamingos about too. I've actually had some really good conversations about this one recently. Um, I'm not marginalizing anybody's weight loss journey. I'm fully aware and I completely acknowledge that if you've been 110 pounds for the entirety of your adult life and you gain 20 pounds, that is a huge deal. My accountability on this one is knowing that my experience with weight loss was very different from being thin and then having to deal with weight gain and loss. It's not my lane, so I stay out of it. I wouldn't know what I was talking about. I can't relate to that experience. I was bullied for most of my childhood because of my weight. I hated my body as a teenager and into my 20s. I don't have the first fucking clue what it's like to have lived my life in a thin body and walked through the world as a thin person and to then have to deal with weight gain, with being treated differently, with learning how to cope with a whole new set of feelings about your body and yourself. But I can see how difficult that would be. It must be hard. I can see that. If you've always weighed 100 pounds and you find yourself at a buck 25, that's a big deal. That is a sizable percentage to gain. I had to lose more than 60% of my body weight. I know people who've lost more than that. I used to be a lot more afraid to tell the truth on this one, but it is harder to lose a lot of weight than it is to lose a relatively small amount. And that is a scary thing to say. Again, I'm not saying that losing 20 pounds when you've always weighed 110 is easy. It's not. It's hard. Losing any amount of weight is hard. I'm saying that it's not the same experience as losing a significant amount of weight. It's not as hard. It's just not. It just isn't. And I mean, just look at the numbers. Just look at the amount of time involved here. It's quantifiably more difficult in that way. But then there's the mindset side. And I'm sorry, Gladys, but good for you if you've never been in a morbidly obese body. You really, really need to stay in your lane on this one. We deserve space too. And I do hate that that makes some people feel excluded from the conversation. That is not my intention. I'm maybe a little bit touchy on this one because I feel like people with a lot of weight to lose have been excluded for so long. And unless you fit into a niche like keto or you're part of the bariatric community, there just isn't space for you. With Gladys, it's the head game. You've got to be in a completely different head game to slog it out for more than a year, right? But the time part is just one factor. You're not in the same headspace to start with if you've weighed 250 pounds or 300 or 195. A weight's a relative thing. But there is a point where it's a little versus a lot. I'm relatively short, so my lot is different from somebody who's 6 inches or a foot taller than me. And fuck it, I'm sorry, but I get frustrated when I see ads for people saying that they can help you go from this to this, and it's a picture of somebody else, right? But that person, they've clearly lost a shitload of weight. And as somebody who has had their before and after pictures stolen and used by these kinds of accounts, I've got a little bit of experience here, but that part of it is a whole other issue. But the person making the claims is boasting about losing 30 pounds in 60 days. Okay, fine. I'm not even going to argue about the plausibility of that scenario or what the math would have to look like, because you can reverse engineer that situation. But let's just leave all of that and the overall sustainability of that type of method. Fine. Good. You lost 30 pounds in 60 days and you're back down to a $1.05. Outstanding. Please tell me how to cope when I'm on month 16 and I've still got 13 more months to go, because that was my reality, right? I'm sorry. I couldn't stop myself, and I am sorry if this is boring, but I'm going to try and go as quickly as I can through this next part. I am just so sick of seeing this shit, and I feel like if I tell you how I know it's likely bullshit, you'll be more likely to see through it too. So 30 pounds of fat is 105,000 calories. And yeah, I know it's more complicated than that, Gladys. I understand things like glycogen storage and the thermic effect of food. I know it's not as straightforward and cut and dry as a pound of fat being 3,500 calories. But just hiding behind it's too complicated isn't a good enough reason to not at least start to have the conversation on this most fundamental basis. So to drop 30 pounds, that means she cut 105,000 calories from her diet over the course of 60 days. Yeah, I know, Gladys, but we're just going to see this one through, okay? I'm about to make a couple more generalizations that are going to get your knickers in a knot. So just hold on to something. Let's assume that our supplement selling new bestie is 5'6" and her starting weight was the aforementioned 140 pounds, like she said it was. Cool. We're going to put her in her early 30s and say she was moderately active. Okay. She's got 1,866 calories a day as her maintenance TDEE when she starts at 140 pounds. That's how many calories her body needed each day just to maintain her weight. And we know that it took her 60 days to lose her weight. Fine. Let's get slightly more technical just to keep the happy bottom brigade somewhat placated. When she gets the first 15 pounds off, her TDE drops to 1,772. And when she's down to 5 pounds left to go, she's at 1,710. So we're going to use an average of 1,766 calories per day. That means that to maintain her weight, she had 105,960 calories. Let's just circle on back to how many calories are in that 30 pounds of fat. 3,500 times 30 is 105,000. That means that she had 960 calories left to spread over the 60 days. I did that math too. And I thought it was funny when I saw that 960 divided by 60 is a nice round number. It's 16, 1/6. She had 16 calories a day. So you can probably see why I get so torqued when I see people making claims like these. And yes, Gladys, I know there can be a trajectory to weight loss, and a lot of people lose more weight right at the beginning and then level off. Yeah, I got it. But that only makes it worse for the person with a lot to lose. You can't rinse, repeat with a plan like that. Oh, well, it works for 30 pounds, so I'll just tell someone with 120 to lose just to do it 4 times as long. No, fuck. Okay. This is a good segue point, since I am completely off topic now, just to dive into our next section. And our next section is about reasonable expectations. Expectation management is a much bigger part of what I do than I imagined it would be when I started. If your expectations aren't reasonable, you're setting yourself up to fail, period. I know it might seem like it's motivating to shoot for the stars and tell yourself that you're going to lose 3 pounds a week every single week and you're going to have this weight off in a year. Okay. What happens when you don't? And worse, what happens when you hit the point that it is mathematically impossible for you to reach your goal in the time frame that you've laid out? So what happens when it doesn't go the way that you wanted it to? Because it probably won't. This is like the math we just did a minute ago, right? 3 pounds a week is 10,500 calories that you need to cut each week. That's a lot. Because it's not 10,500 from what you're eating now. It's 10,500 from your TDEE. And those are very different things. When I was over 300, I was averaging probably 4,000, 4,500 calories a day. My TDEE was 3,500. So I already needed to cut up to 1,000 calories a day just to stop gaining weight, just to maintain it. Then I had to cut another 500 calories a day to lose a pound a week. So to lose 3 pounds a week, I would need to cut another 1,000 calories a day. So I would have had to go from 4,500 calories a day to 2,000. There isn't a snowball's chance in hell I could have kept that up for a little over a year. Because you have to remember too, that as I kept losing weight, right? My TDEE would have kept dropping as I lost that weight. And I would have had fewer and fewer calories each day. So the cuts just would have kept getting deeper and less sustainable. At 200 pounds, I had a TDEE of around 2,100 calories. To lose a pound a week, I'd have had to drop to 1,600. To lose 3 pounds a week, I'd need to drop to 1,100. No chance. No chance. I still had more than 60 pounds to go. No chance. But I know that I've already lost a bunch of you, right? Because the math part sucks. It's not fun listening to a bunch of numbers. So if you're still here, thank you. I promise that's over now. But I really hope it makes sense too, and I hope that it's helpful. And I know it sounds complicated, but it's not that bad. When I hear a weight loss claim from a product like lose 10 pounds in 10 days, my brain goes, okay, so those pills are somehow supposed to help you cut 35,000 calories. And Gladys, I know that a whack of the weight will be water weight in the first couple of days and it'll all come back on. Thank you for making my point for me in part. You have to keep your expectations reasonable, especially when you're in this for the long haul. A reasonable expectation has to be both possible and plausible. And in a lot of ways, the plausible one is the most important of the two. Is it possible for me to become Prime Minister of Canada? Technically, yes, I meet all the criteria. Is it plausible? No, not at all. Is it possible to lose 2 pounds a week every week? Technically, yes, absolutely. Is it plausible that you're going to lose 2 pounds a week every week? No, it isn't. Not at all. Not even a little bit. The super brutal truth, and you've probably heard me say this before, nobody loses their weight in a straight line. It doesn't happen, even on the shots. It isn't plausible to expect to lose weight every single week of your journey. That means it can't be reasonable. And unless your expectations are reasonable, you're setting yourself up to fail. When I was fat, I felt like I was failing just by existing. I felt like I was letting everybody down, especially myself. I was so disappointed in myself all the time. I was just perpetually disappointed. Every time I couldn't do something, every time I went on a food bender, most of the time when I was looking in the mirror or putting on my clothes. In some ways, I could have called this segment disappointment management. I don't know about you, but disappointment is an emotion I can eat to cope with all day long. It's not a fun feeling, but eating to cope with it can be. Which is why you need your expectations to be reasonable. Because if they aren't, and you're feeling disappointed in yourself, that's one more emotion that you have to deal with. Now, I've never once argued that you should shut down your emotional eating, but you do need to learn how to manage it. Part of that is learning how to avoid the emotions that trigger your comfort, reward, and cope mechanism. Not because I think you can avoid disappointment on the road to your healthy weight, but because I think you can mitigate it by knowing that it's coming. You can accept it as part of the trip, right? You know you got to drive over that horrible suspension bridge to get to your cousin's house. You hate it, but there's no other way around it. So you steel yourself against it, and over you go. You're going to have weeks where the scale doesn't move or it moves in the wrong direction. You can hate it, but all you can do is steel yourself against it because you know it's coming. It doesn't take the disappointment away, but it does take some of the sting out. And that's a pretty perfect segue to tip number 5, knowing it will end. You have to keep telling yourself that so long as you keep going, this is going to end. All these feelings that are a byproduct of the whole weight loss process, they will stop when you stop losing weight because you've hit your goal. There are going to be other feelings, new feelings. That's unavoidable. But a fair few of the weight loss specific ones are going to end. I'm saying this because when you're caught up in super emotionally draining work, like losing a significant amount of weight, it can feel like those feelings aren't ever going to stop, that they're just a permanent thing. And sometimes you might not even realize that specific feelings are connected to your weight until it and they are gone. It can feel like the feelings you have about your body are never going to stop. They're not, but they will change. It will be different. And I know that's scary, but what if it's better? It's hard to know how you're going to feel when you get to the top of the mountain, especially when you've been climbing for a long time. It must be impossible, right? You can try to imagine what it will feel like. You can daydream about it, and I highly recommend doing both of those things, but you're not actually going to know until you get there. When climbing is hard and you're focused on the next step, not even the one after that, just the very next step, it can be hard to imagine something as abstract as how the summit is going to feel. And I know literally what it feels like when every next step matters, but you can only think about trying to get your body through the one you're trying to do right now. But I didn't think that learning how to walk was as apt a metaphor for this one as climbing a mountain. Mostly because it was very possible for me to imagine what it would feel like to be able to move my body freely. I didn't have to imagine it, I could remember it. I walked into the hospital just hours before my airlift. I didn't have to imagine shit. But I did have to force my body, have to will my body to move. And I started from zero. We're talking lie there and point my toes as far forward as I can and then try to pull them back towards my face, right? Need a team of 3 people and sometimes a hoist to get me into a sitting position at the edge of the bed. Can't sit upright on my own at all or roll from side to side. That kind of zero. But I knew it would end too, so long as I kept going. And weight loss is like that. Knowing it's going to end is a way to keep yourself going. When you're bogged down in the day-to-day grind, it can be really hard to hold on to that. But to make the feeling stop, you have to keep going as much as you might not want to. And I know what it's like to not want to and to want to at the same time. I felt that way about weight loss and relearning how to walk. But they're opposite sides of the coin. With weight loss, it was a mindset issue. And with learning how to walk again, it was a physical one. I wanted to lose weight, but I didn't want to put myself through the process of actually doing it. I was struggling to cope with it emotionally. And I wanted to walk, but I didn't want to put myself through the extremely painful and completely exhausting process of actually doing it. This is going to end. You just have to keep going. Tip number 6 will help with that. You need to have a singular focus and accept that you don't have a choice. This is a big one for me, and I know I've banged this drum before, but here we are. And I do realize that when you get right down to it, most of the things on these lists have been drums that I bang all the time. This tip would be drum number 33, which is a great number. But I'm self-conscious about this one because of where it comes from. I always worry that when I talk about the whole almost dying thing, that you're just sick of hearing about it. I probably am. So I figure you guys are too. I'm still not comfortable talking about this stuff. Words are my jam, but this part is hard. I can tell you, I've learned that if you want to keep going so that you can lose weight and keep it off, you need to have a singular focus and just accept that you have no choice. But that's not really as powerful as showing you how I learned that. The only real issue there is that for me to do that, I have to dive back into my trauma, and I've done therapy. I'm actively working on myself all the time, but I still struggle with this. My brain has changed because of the PICS and the PTSD. I'd love to say that 8 years out, I am the one in control of the flashbacks or the way my body reacts to certain types of helicopters flying overhead, but I'm not. I do think it's real progress that I only have physical reactions to the helicopters now. I don't have full-blown emotional meltdowns anymore. Okay, well, not all the time. I do have emotional meltdowns about it some of the time. And virtually all of the time, my body still completely loses it and freaks out. But I'm not my body. I'm the thing that lives inside my body. And I am super good at separating myself when I start to feel the helicopter coming. Because fun fact, I can feel them in my chest long before I can hear them or see them. Here's another fun fact for you. My house, the one I live in right now, the dream house that we bought 2.5 years after I came home from my 5-month hospital stay, that house, something we didn't know when we bought it, but the universe clearly has a sense of humor. This house is directly under the flight path of the emergency airlift hospitals, the one that they take to get from their base to our hospital. And I mean directly under it. Sometimes I feel like they're coming in so low I could stand on my roof and hold up a broom and I'd be able to touch them with it. But you can see what happens when I try and talk about this stuff. But I do think that this is funny in a wow, if this doesn't feel like a message, I don't know what would kind of way. And I also think it can help to make a case for the benefits of exposure therapy. Uh, if you're new, you might not know that the time I almost died thing. And I guess I have to start saying the first time because there have been a couple of really close calls since then. But to try and keep myself to a singular focus, I mean the 5 months in hospital, necrotizing pancreatitis, Ogilvy syndrome, crash C-section, relearning how to roll from side to side, walk, sit, 13 blood transfusions, whole bunch of other stuff. That time, I almost died. I was also obese that time, and I was at a healthy weight last year and the year before when things got close again. So there are massive differences between my first hospital experience and the two that followed it. The first time, all of that started with a ride on a life flight. I don't even remember most of it. Like, I remember less than 5 minutes. It's probably closer to two. And I have no memory at all of being unloaded from it. On, yes, I clearly remember being loaded into the helicopter. I remember being wheeled down the hallway before to get to it. And I remember not understanding what was about to happen. Nothing extraordinary happened on my airlift that I am aware of. It was delayed, which freaked Sean out because he actually beat me to the city. He drove all the way to Toronto, fully expecting that I would be already there waiting for him when he got there, like things would be underway, and that I would have been there for like 20 minutes or so. I wasn't there yet. But nothing happened to speak of. I was in and out of consciousness, but I'd been doing that for hours. I didn't have to be resuscitated or anything, fancy and dramatic like that. It was just a super fast helicopter ride strapped to a gurney. But my body remembers, and it really doesn't like it. My time in the 5 months that followed was the hardest thing I have ever done. And I didn't actually do much. I couldn't do much. My job was to endure and do what I was told so that they could heal my body. I was very good at one of those things, and I did the absolute best I could with the other. But when the things they need to do to save your life are also very hard to endure, it can be challenging to do what you're told. I have spent years thinking about the question, how did I survive? Years. I've distilled my answer down to two things: have a singular focus and accept that you don't have a choice. That's how you get through weight loss too. I know my example is extreme and maybe seems very different from losing weight. It is, but it isn't at the same time, because fighting for your life is fighting for your life. Just like hard is hard and pain is pain. Just because it doesn't hurt as badly when you break your arm as it does to have a fingernail ripped off, that doesn't mean breaking your arm doesn't hurt. And those aren't random examples, Gladys. I've done both of those things. But I'm using them to show that one experience doesn't negate another. You don't look at someone at a funeral and invalidate their grief because you've lost someone closer to you than the dead person was to them. Hard is hard. It's all relative. Your hard and your neighbor's hard are going to be different. It all hinges on who you are and what you've already endured. There's a spectrum of experience, of intensity. When you're battling obesity, you're fighting for your life. And I don't even just mean in terms of time, I mean in terms of quality. That's your singular focus, the fight for life. And you don't have a choice. But this is an attitude that you have to choose, because obviously you do have a choice. I did with the whole relearning to walk thing. I could have just dug in and refused to do it, but I would still be lying there, right? I'd still be more than 100 pounds overweight. And actually, the truth is, I would probably be dead. So I had to learn how to stand a few seconds at a time, and it sucked every second of the time. Every single second sucked. Then I had to walk, and it sucked too. There was one moment, just one, Eileen. She was a very special nurse, and I've talked a little bit about her before, and I could spend the next half hour explaining. No, I can do this. Explaining how much she meant to me. But I'll tell you this quick little story instead, and I think that'll just show you. So I'd been there for months. I was not out of the woods. I had new setbacks coming, but I was progressing with the walking. There were these painted like paw prints or circles on the floor, depending. And every day, each day, I would try to get to the next one. So this was my very first day in a standard walker. like the kind you see an old lady with at the mall. Up until then, I'd been using a contraption I called the Terminator. I've described it before, but it was a massive walker with wheels, and it had a platform I could lay my arms on at chest level, and I could take a whole bunch of weight off my legs, right? So my first day in the normal walker was a really, really big deal. And I was so excited. And I wanted it so badly. The new walker, the walking. It was so frustrating to be completely exhausted and ready to collapse after just a few feet and then a few meters. Sometimes my response to frustration is to push back hard. And I really wanted to be with my boys. Singular focus. The only way I could do that was to get physically strong enough and not be sick anymore. So I didn't have a choice. This day I was pushing hard. And I had just hit the point where I could go up like a couple of rooms, and then down a little hallway and then come back. It was like I was going around a teeny tiny little block. Well, when I came around the corner on the home stretch, I saw Eileen talking to someone in the hall. And I didn't know that she was there that day. And I just started calling her name as loud as I could and moving faster. And it was the fastest I'd moved since before I got sick, which freaked out the physio team. There was at least two of them that were with me and helping me to walk and keeping me safe and carrying my IVs and the chest tube box thing. But it felt like I was running. I wasn't, right? It was just the first continuous movement that I'd had. But I was so excited and I was so proud of myself. And I knew that she would be proud of me too. And that was the only moment that didn't truly suck when I was learning to walk again. Tracking what you're eating sucks, but it's a means to an end. Having to cut back on what you're eating, no matter how incrementally, sucks. Having to find new ways to comfort, reward, and cope with your emotions sucks. Lots of the parts of losing weight unavoidably suck. But if you choose the perspective that you don't have a choice, they suck a little less. Take the choice out of the equation and you'll increase your determination. It just is what it is. You don't have to decide. You've made the decision. To tie in another one of today's themes, you've made the macro decision to lose weight. That means the micro decisions aren't really decisions at all. They're just what you have to do to get to the macro goal. And when you look at things that way, it's easier to keep yourself going. You decide that you're going to take on your relationship with food, right? You've made that decision. And to do that, there are things that you just have to do. They are what they are. And I know that's all mindset stuff, and it's easier said than done. But trying to do it is how you actually do it. When it comes to life, trying is doing a lot of the time. It can feel like you're failing, but you're still doing it. Trying to change your relationship with food is how you change your relationship with food. It's a process, and you're not going to make it through any process without trying. The seventh way to keep yourself going is going to feel maybe a little bit counterintuitive at first, but you really do need to acknowledge that your road is longer. If you've got a lot of weight to lose, it's going to take longer. I can hear how ridiculous that may sound, but I'm saying it because it needs to be said. Toxic diet culture has skewed our expectations so badly that we feel like we're failing if we don't lose a lot of weight in a short amount of time, and it is just not true. When we talked about expectations earlier, we talked about why you need to keep them reasonable and how to make yourself aware of how long you can reasonably expect it to take to get your weight off. That took care of awareness when it comes to how long your road is going to be. Just because you know how long it's probably going to take you to get your weight off doesn't mean you've accepted it or acknowledged it. And it might seem like a silly distinction for me to be making, but when it comes to your mindset, it's a pretty big one. Choosing to bury your head in the sand on this, not acknowledging that it's a very different and longer road when you've got a lot of weight to lose, can be a critical error, a catastrophic one. I get the school of thought that focusing on how long it takes is discouraging. And I've thought about this and I have really tried to weigh it out, and I can see that it can be discouraging. Here's the thing. It's way more discouraging not to confront how long it takes until you start feeling like it's taking too long. I can sit here all day and tell you how normal it is for it to take a long time to lose weight sustainably, and how happy you'll be that you did it that way once you get there. But it still sucks when you're going through it. And I just can't see how throwing blinders on and pretending that those feelings don't happen is helpful to anybody. Also, I'm not saying focus on it or dwell on it. I'm saying 3A weigh it. Be aware of it, right? And I really covered awareness for this with my little Gladys rant earlier, but be aware that it's going to be a longer road. Acknowledge it by doing something like running your numbers. Going with 1.25 pounds a week average leaves room to plausibly and potentially surprise yourself by exceeding your expectations. So if you've got 125 pounds to lose, you're reasonably looking at a 100-week road. I know what a shot to the gut that might be, and I am sorry. Because, yeah, that is almost 2 years, right? But the time is going to pass whether you're doing something about your weight or not. So you might as well start the clock. Because what I don't want to happen is for you to get a year in, right? Be like 70 pounds or so down, right? And you feel like you're doing something wrong or like you're failing at it because you're not. You're on the right track. Well done. Keep going. That's how acknowledging the actual length of your road keeps you going. It lets you hold on to a perspective that will keep you moving forward. It keeps you in a more positive headspace. The eighth way to keep yourself going does both of those things too. Hold on to perspective and stay in a more positive headspace. You need to celebrate little wins. You need to build yourself up. We've spent a lot of time this week talking about how hard this is and looking for ways to keep yourself motivated. Learning to see the little wins and really acknowledge them is going to help keep you going. I get keeping your eye on the prize. The whole point is to get to your goal weight. Okay, that's fine. But to go from 338 to 137, I had to weigh all the numbers in between. And yeah, some of them feel more exciting than others. Wonderland is a huge deal. So was getting below 250 and below 300. It felt amazing to drop below 155 pounds for the first time since I was a kid. But I still had to beat all the other numbers in between. And they all count. They're all little wins. Every time I went down a size in my clothes or put a cookie back instead of just eating it because I took it, so why not? Those are all little wins. There were days at the beginning that making it through the day and tracking everything was a win. Celebrate the little things, the little wins, the non-scale victories, and the ones that only happen in your head. When you're losing a lot of weight, you're struggling with a lot. That also means you've got opportunities to find little wins on multiple fronts because they aren't just about the tangibles, the smaller sizes, and the slightly smaller portions, the decreasing number on the scale. They're about the little decisions that led to those things. They're about making different choices and identifying patterns within your relationship with food. You need to get in the habit of congratulating yourself for those mindset wins too. I'm not saying throw yourself a party every time you catch yourself questioning your emotional eating. Even just a quick nod mentally, stopping to recognize when you've made a different choice, a better choice than you would have before you started with this approach to weight loss. The other side of this is our last suggestion today. I think you need to stop beating yourself up. The whole toxic diet industry horse shit line about how you have to break someone down to build them back up. It's garbage. Just garbage. I was already broken. I didn't need anyone to make me feel worse about myself than I already did. You don't need to feel worse either. Celebrate the version of yourself that's fighting for change, that's fighting to get yourself into a healthier body. Yeah, I know you make some shitty choices. I know you're not happy with yourself all the time. Everybody does, and nobody is. We all make shit choices. We all have moments where we're not happy with ourselves and the choices we make. You have to give yourself a chance to morph into the version of yourself that's making better choices and fighting for change, even when you've let yourself down. And that means you have to build yourself up as much as you can. Small incremental changes isn't just about food for me. It's a mindset thing too. Stop beating yourself up. It doesn't help. It only traps you in this cycle. And sometimes, if we're being super starkly honest with ourselves, we can acknowledge that you use beating yourself up as a mechanism to get yourself to eat. Part of your brain knows that if it beats you up enough, if it makes you feel bad enough about yourself, you're going to fall back into your old patterns and habits, and it will end with you reaching for food. Beating yourself up ends in eating. And sometimes that's what part of you wants. And that part is used to winning. Building yourself up is what will interrupt the cycle. Try to catch yourself with your negative thoughts. Try to replace them not with the opposite. Don't lie to yourself, but find a small positive. Find a good thing you believe about yourself and say that instead. But if that feels too far-fetched, that's cool. But at the very least, do the best you can to shut yourself down when you start to beat yourself up. Use the think method to shut yourself down. Is what you're saying about yourself true? Is it helpful? And that one right there is probably going to put an end to things. Just write that in there. But if you need to, you can keep going. Is it inspiring, necessary, kind? Give that a try. Next week, I'm doing one of the most requested episode topics ever. Maintenance mode. How do you keep the weight off? And I love this topic. Yeah, I am all about weight loss. That is totally what I do. But a huge, massive part of my overall goal is to help with that 85% recidivism rate. I gained more than half my weight back. I know how miserable it feels. So it's personal for me. I can't see the point in helping someone to get their weight off only to leave them stranded without the skills they need to keep the weight off. But damn near everything out there is strictly focused on the weight loss part. That's why 12 of the program's 53 weeks are spent on what now? What do you do to get yourself all the way to the finish line? And then how do you stay on the other side? You can find more out about the program on my website, disruptingobesity.com. And while you're there, you might as well grab a copy of my free guide to getting started for the last time. If you missed the webinar, you can grab a link to the replay in the notes. The download is still free, and so is the webinar. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to be on Instagram and YouTube all week, and then I'll see you back here next Monday. Keep trying, keep tracking, don't be intimidated, and don't give up. You've totally got this. Thank you for listening to Disrupting Obesity with Charlotte Skanes. If you know it's time to take back control, lose the weight, and keep it off, reach out to me privately with a direct message on Instagram that says ready, so you can start disrupting obesity.